I came upon that village by accident. My horse was lame, and the road was mud after days of rain. The place wasn't marked on any map, a scattering of cottages clinging to the hillside, roofs sagging beneath moss and smoke. No banner flew above it, no church bell called its people. It was the kind of village the world forgets, except for one thing. At the heart of the square stood a well. A simple thing, at first glance: stone circle, worn rope, and a bucket so old its wood was soft as sponge. But the villagers kept away. Even in daylight, I noticed, no one filled their pails there. Instead, they trudged half a mile to a spring in the forest. When I asked a woman why, she shook her head, eyes fixed on the ground. It isn't safe, not after dark. And when I pressed her, she spat 3 words through her teeth as if to speak them would draw misfortune. The screaming well. That night I saw for myself. The tavern gave me no welcome, only a cold bench and colder stares. The innkeeper muttered, "Keep indoors once the sun goes down." But I was curious, too curious. So when the sky turned the color of bruises, I walked into the square. The well stood alone in the moonlight, its stones slick with damp. The air was still. The village lay silent. And then, a sound. Not wind, not beast, a voice. "Help me, please, pull me out." The words drifted up from the well's mouth, hollow, strangled. My blood chilled. I leaned closer. "Please," the voice cried, now louder, as if the stone itself were weeping. I gripped the rope. My mind screamed against it, but my hands moved on their own. I lowered the bucket into the dark. The rope groaned. The bucket sunk and never struck water. Then, a shriek. So piercing, I stumbled back, clutching my ears. The rope snapped from my hands, whipping into the dark. And something pulled back. The rope jerked upward, though no one held it. A shadow rose within the well, twisting, thrashing, as though clawing for escape. I fled. I ran into the night, the cries chasing me down the square. The next morning, the villagers told me the tale. Decades ago, a soldier returned from war. Wounded, delirious, he staggered into the square and fell into the well. They lowered a rope, but when they tried to haul him up, he screamed so violently that the men let go. They say he was not alone. Hands had seized him from the water, pale hands, dragging him deeper. His cries turned to howls, then to silence. The villagers filled the well with stone. They buried it, they sealed it, but the cries never stopped. At first, one voice, then 2, then dozens. Some swore they recognized their own dead among them. A mother claimed to hear her drowned child. A farmer swore his brother's voice called his name. And worst of all, those who lingered too long felt hands brushing their ankles, clutching, tugging, cold as the grave. That evening I made ready to leave, but as I passed the square, the well stood waiting. The stone circle seemed higher now, the shadows deeper. Against every instinct, I stepped closer. The air was icy. The world fell silent. And then, from below, a voice I knew. "Please, help me." My heart froze. It was my brother's voice. He had died years before, far from this place. Yet here it was, clear, desperate, begging. "Pull me out," he pleaded. I staggered back, My brother had drowned in a river. His body was never found. How could his voice echo from this pit? Then the others began. Dozens of them, a chorus of agony rising from below. Help me! Don't leave me! Save us! The voices climbed, screaming, clawing at the night. I saw the rope twitch. I swear, I saw pale fingers curling over the stone. I ran. I did not stop until the village was far behind. And even then, the voices followed. It has been years since that night, but sometimes when I pass a well, I hear it. A faint cry beneath the splash of water. And when I dream, I feel hands at my feet, cold and wet, tugging me down. The screaming well still calls, and one day, I fear, I will answer.
I had heard whispers of Woolpit long before I set foot there. Priests spoke of it in hushed tones after drink. Travelers told the tale by firelight, their voices dropping when the night grew too still. I thought it no more than a folk tale, another story twisted to scare children. But when my road bent towards Suffolk, I found myself in the very place. The village lay quiet among rolling fields, the earth pale where chalk had been cut into deep pits. The air smelled of grain and dust. A single church tower rose above the cottages, its bell tolling as if it had rung since time itself began. And all around, the pits gaped like wounds in the earth, white chalk walls, treacherous to the unwary. It was there, the villagers told me, that the children appeared. 2 of them. A boy and a girl. No one knew from where they came. One afternoon, farmers working the fields heard cries, and when they followed, they found the pair standing at the lip of a pit, trembling, clutching one another's hands. Their faces were drawn, their eyes wide with terror. And their skin was green. Not paint, not sickness, not the pallor of the dying. Their flesh itself bore that strange hue, as though the blood had been replaced with leaves, as if some twilight world had stained them. They wore garments no villager recognized, cloth woven fine, but of fibers coarse and strange, glinting faintly when the sun struck them. And when they opened their mouths, their words tumbled in a tongue no ear could make sense of, rough and lilting, like the echo of water down stone. I listened as the villagers spoke of those days. Some had offered the children bread, meat, berries. All refused. The boy and girl turned their faces away, shuddering as though the very sight of such food repulsed them. It was not until someone brought green beans, freshly pulled from the stalk, that their eyes lit. They fell upon them like starving animals, tearing at the pods with frantic hands, devouring them raw, crunching even the stems. The villagers pitied them. A local knight took them into his care, clothing them, teaching them. But still they wasted away, for the food of our world seemed foreign to them. The boy weakened first. His green skin grew pale, his eyes dim, his voice a faint murmur in that strange tongue. Within weeks, he died. The villagers buried him in the churchyard, uncertain whether they laid a child of flesh or some spirit of the earth. But the girl lived. I sought her grave when I came to Woolpack. It lay in shadow, marked with a simple stone, and as I stood there, the villagers told me her story. Over time, she learned our tongue, at first halting, broken, her words spilling out like pebbles dropped in a stream. But with patience, she began to speak clearly, and when she did, she revealed a tale unlike I had ever heard. She spoke of a land beneath the earth, a place where the light was dim and eternal, where the sun never rose and never set, a twilight world, shrouded in shadow. Fields stretched wide and endless, watered by rivers that glowed faintly as if lit by unseen fires deep below. The people there all bore the same green hue as she, their voices pitched in that strange cadence. One day, she and her brother tended their father's flocks when a great bell tolled. Not once, but again and again, echoing across the twilight fields. They followed, curious, frightened. The sound drew them toward a cavern, its walls damp, the air thick with fog. They pressed on, searching for the bell, until a blinding light burned their eyes. When at last they stumbled out, they were here, in Woolpit. In a world where the sun blazed so bright it seared their skin. The girl lived many years among the villagers. She learned their prayers, their songs. She worked their fields and broke their bread. But she never lost that look in her eyes, as if she gazed always into a distance none of us could see. I asked an old man who had known her in his youth what she was like. He said, she was kind, gentle, but she was never one of us, not truly. She laughed when we laughed, but it was hollow, as though she were listening to some other music we could not hear. At night, she would wander to the fields, stand among the pits, and speak softly. We thought she prayed, but her words were not in our tongue. When at last she died, they buried her in the churchyard. Yet those who dug her grave said the earth was colder than it should be, even in summer. Their breath frosted, though the day was warm. The ground seemed reluctant to close around her. And when the bell tolled for her passing, the villagers swore it rang strangely. A long, hollow sound, stretched and warped, as if struck by no human hand. I lingered by her grave as the sun set. The earth beneath me felt strange, as though it shifted ever so slightly, like the surface of water. And in the air, faint but clear, I thought I heard it, the tolling of a bell. Not from the church tower, but from beneath the earth. A deep, distant ringing, muffled by soil and stone. I pressed my ear to the ground. And in that moment, I understood the truth. The green girl had never truly left her twilight world. Her body lay here, but her spirit still heard the bells. Even now, when the fields of Woolpit fall silent, the villagers say you can hear it too, that faint tolling far below, calling you down. And if you follow, you may never return to the sun again. I had been warned about the Druid long before I ever felt it. The name came to me in whispers, muttered in taverns when the fire burned low, spoken by mothers to hush restless children. Some said it was not a creature, but a curse, born of witchcraft or sin. Others swore it was a demon older than scripture, feeding upon the breath of sleepers. It was said that the Druid came not in daylight, nor in the open, but in the deepest hours of night, when fire gutters and the body lies heavy with sleep. Then it comes, to sit upon the chest, to still the limbs, to choke the voice, and to whisper things no ear should hear. I thought it no more than rustic superstition, until the night I felt it for myself. I had taken lodging in a small village in Germany,
a place tucked between forest and river, where mist clung to the roofs and dogs barked at shadows. The inn was humble, a single room above the tap room, the bed little more than straw bound in cloth, but I was weary, and I slept. Sometime in the night, I woke. The fire had died to embers, their faint glow casting long shadows against the wall. The room was cold, and upon my chest there was a weight. At first I thought I dreamed. I tried to shift, but my arms lay stiff at my sides. I willed my fingers to move, they did not. I tried to draw breath, it came shallow, strangled. My eyes darted about the room, the only part of me that answered my command, and then I saw it. In the far corner, where the embers barely reached, the shadows were wrong. They bent where no wall should bend. They curled inward, trembling like smoke, yet solid, darker than night itself. And from within that shadow came a sound. Breathing. Slow. Steady. But not mine. I tried to cry out, but no voice rose in my throat. My chest felt crushed, as though a millstone pinned me to the bed. My heart pounded so violently I thought it would burst. And then it moved. The shadow peeled itself from the corner, stretching long and thin across the wall. It did not step, but slithered, sliding soundlessly until it loomed above me. And though it had no face, no mouth that I could see, I felt its breath upon my ear, a whisper. "Stay still, or I'll never leave." The words curled into my mind, searing themselves there. My body strained to move, to scream, to flee, but still I was bound. The thing pressed harder, the weight upon my chest near unbearable. Again it whispered, this time in a tongue not my own, harsh syllables that scrape like iron across stone. Yet somehow I understood. Promises, threats, secrets of the grave. At last the first rays of dawn touched the shutters. The shadow shivered, withdrew. The weight lifted. My limbs loosened, and with a gasp I sat upright, choking, clutching at my chest. The room was empty, but when I looked down, I saw them. Red welts across my skin, deep as though claws had pressed into me through the night. I told myself it was a nightmare, my mind playing tricks in a place of unease. But the villagers knew better. When I asked, they grew pale, crossing themselves. An old woman spat into the dirt. She visits many. She comes to those who are weak and to those who wander. A miller told me his wife had been plagued by it nightly. She would wake unable to move, her lips trembling as whispers filled her ears. Soon, she began to answer out loud, in words he did not know. By day she grew silent, her eyes hollow, until one morning she did not wake at all. A monk in the nearby abbey spoke of a brother who had endured the same. He lived, the monk said, but not as himself. His body walked, prayed, even sang the psalms, but his eyes... The monk shuddered. It was as if someone else looked out through them. The villagers called it the Druid, though some had other names. Alp, Nochtmar, Trude, always the same thing. A demon of the night, feeding on the helpless. Some said it only stole the breath. Others claimed it drank the soul itself, drop by drop, until nothing remained. That night, I dared sleep again. I lay upon the straw, every muscle tense, waiting. Hours crawled past. The fire dimmed. The room grew heavy. My eyes fluttered. And then, it returned. The weight fell upon my chest with such sudden force I thought my ribs cracked. My limbs froze, useless. I could not even turn my head. The shadow stretched from the corner once more, long fingers curling across the ceiling, bending where no joint should bend. It leaned closer. Its breath was ice against my cheek. "You cannot run." Tears welled in my eyes, though I could not close them. My heart thundered, my mind screamed. I begged in silence, though no sound passed my lips. The thing pressed closer, so near that the air itself seemed to die. When at last I woke, dawn had broken. My chest ached as though crushed, and across my ribs, deeper this time, I found scratches, raw, bleeding, carved in jagged lines. I left the village that day, yet the Druid did not stay behind. In the night since, it has returned, not always, but sometimes. I will wake with that weight upon me, my limbs stiff, my breath shallow. I will feel its presence, hear the hiss of its whisper, and worst of all, each time it stays longer. The first it left at dawn. The second, it lingered until the sun warmed the room. The third, even as the day rose bright, I still felt its hand, pressing faintly, a reminder. It is patient. It waits. And when at last it decides not to leave, I fear I will never rise from my bed again.
I have walked among graves. I have lingered at wells that scream, stood at churchyards where bells toll from beneath the earth, and felt shadows crush the breath from my lungs. But never have I known such horror as when I came to Scotland and stood at the mouth of Sawney Bean's cave. It lay upon a lonely stretch of coast where the tide gnaws endlessly at the rock. The sea here is cruel, jagged cliffs, waves that crush bone against stone. Few dare tread it. Yet it was here that Sawney Bean made his dwelling and raised his brood. I had heard the tale as a traveler does, whispered in inns, muttered by shepherds, sung in ballads too ghastly for children. A man, a robber turned murderer, who fled into the caves with his wife. There they bred, and bred again, raising a clan not upon wheat or cattle, but upon flesh. Human flesh. I thought it fable. But when I came to those cliffs, the villagers led me and showed me where the truth still lay. The cave mouth was wide enough for two men to walk abreast, but the tide covered it twice a day, hiding all trace. Only when the water fell did the entrance yawn open, black and dripping, exhaling the stench of rot. The villagers would not go nearer. They crossed themselves, muttering prayers, leaving me to tread alone. I stepped into the darkness. The air was wet, thick with salt. The stone walls dripped, the sound echoing as though the cavern breathed. And then, beneath that steady drip, I heard it. The faintest groan, carried by the sea wind. I pressed on, deeper. The light behind me shrank to nothing. My torch spat and smoked, the flame wavering in the damp air. And then I saw them. Bones. Piled high, heaped against the walls like driftwood. Femurs and skulls, ribs cracked open, marrow long since sucked dry. Some still bore shreds of flesh, blackened with age. Others were fresh, gnawed to splinters. And not only bones, skins, faces, peeled and stretched across the stone, tacked with crude iron spikes. Their mouths still gaped, their eyes empty sockets, their features twisted in final agony. The walls wept salt water, streaking those faces until they seemed to weep as well. I stumbled back, choking on the stench. My torchlight caught something glistening. At first I thought it was water, but no, it was meat. Strips of flesh, salted and hung from hooks, swaying faintly in the draft. Limbs, severed and drained, stacked neatly as firewood. And deeper still, a mound of entrails, heaped like a butcher's offal, buzzing faintly with flies that should not have been alive in that salt air. This was no legend. This had been a larder. When I returned to the villagers, pale and shaken, they told me the rest. For 25 years, travelers vanished on the roads that crossed those cliffs. Whole parties disappeared. Merchants, pilgrims, even armed men. Gone, without trace.
The king's men searched, but the moors and forests swallowed all. Only at low tide did the sea give up its secrets. Sometimes a hand, stripped of flesh. Sometimes a torso, hacked open. Always gnawed clean. The villagers lived in terror. They barred their doors at night, never traveled alone, prayed their children home from the fields. But still, the disappearances continued. It was not until one man escaped that the truth was revealed. He was a peddler, traveling with his wife. The Bean clan fell upon them on the road, a dozen wild men and women, ragged, stinking of salt and blood. They struck down the wife first, tearing her from her husband's arms. He would have followed, but fortune sent a company of riders along the same road. The Beans fled to their cave, leaving the man half mad, drenched in his wife's blood. He told the king what he had seen. The king himself rode out with 100 men. They followed the stench, the tide, the gulls that wheeled above. And when the sea pulled back, they found the cave. What they saw within was worse than any battlefield. Dozens of Sawney's kin, naked and wild, crouched among heaps of corpses. Infants suckled at mothers who fed on raw flesh, even as the soldiers stormed in. Children sharpened bones into knives. Men gnawed fat from charred limbs. The king's men dragged them out screaming, half feral, their teeth red, their eyes glaring with madness. 46 of them in all. Sons, daughters, grandchildren, inbred for generations. Not one had lived beyond those caves. And yet, they laughed. Even as they were bound, they laughed. The villagers told me of their end. There was no trial. No priest would pray for them. No magistrate would hear their pleas. The king ordered them taken to Leith, where the people of Scotland gathered. The men were hacked to pieces, their limbs torn away while they still drew breath. The women and children watched, shrieking, until their turn came. Then they were burned, their ashes scattered to the wind. Sawney himself was last. They cut him down, limb by limb, but he cursed them still. With his final breath, he spat blood at the crowd, swearing his spirit would never die. The villagers swore the cave has never fallen silent. Some say they hear screams when the tide rushes in, as if the sea itself carries the echoes of their torment. Others claim to see figures upon the cliff at night, gaunt shapes, watching, waiting. I tell you this, when I stood once more at the cave mouth with the tide rising, I heard it too. Not the sea, not the wind. Voices, dozens of them wailing in the dark, crying out with hunger that has never been sated. And in the blackness of that cave, just before the tide swallowed it whole, I saw a shape move. Not man, not shadow, something between. A hand, long and pale, reaching just beyond the stone.
This was medieval horrors. Tonight, my friends, we walked past wells that scream, met children from beneath the earth, felt the weight of demons in the dark, and stood in the caves of cannibals. But this is only the beginning. If you dare return, we will descend deeper, into dungeons, into plague pits, into the places where death was only the beginning. Until then, keep your candles lit and never walk alone in the dark.